Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for June 27th, 2024. Well, I'm going to be reporting on reality beginning to hit in Europe, maybe even in the United States a little bit. But it has to do not with a sudden awakening of the leaders to the fact that their policies are mistaken, but to the rebellion that they're seeing in the population. For those of you who are skeptical about a mobilization of people having an effect, pay attention today, because it's clear that around the world we're beginning to see a change occurring because of people refusing to accept the failed policies of neoliberalism and the neoconservative war policy. So let me just begin with three quotes which provide some insight into the problems we're facing, especially after the deadly attack by the ATACMS missiles that hit the beach in Crimea on Sunday. First, we have Lawrence Wilkerson, the colonel who was the aide to Colin Powell, who knows what is at stake when governments lie. Wilkerson said, "The US, NATO, and other Western allies' support for the war in Ukraine against Russia is insane. It is killing Ukraine's soldiers for a hopeless cause, other than making money for US and European defense contractors and generating a brutal attempt through proxies to bleed Russia. In fact, Russia," Wilkerson said, "is clearly winning. If a ceasefire is not declared and a genuine peace conference convened soon, there will be little left of Ukraine to salvage." That's from Lawrence Wilkerson. Then we hear from Deputy Foreign Minister in Russia, Sergei Ryabkov, who said yesterday, "The current situation indeed has no easy solutions and no easy way out. Of course, our Western adversaries' underestimation of Russia's readiness to defend itself and ensure its own interests in any situation is risky. I do not even want to speculate that this underestimation may turn out to be tragic, even fatal." And then we have Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, who I think hit the nail on the head with this statement. "The impression is that the ruling elite in the United States has not learned any lessons from its numerous foreign policy and military failures in recent years. It remains blindly committed to the belief in American exceptionalism. As has happened many times in history, this is based on illusions. There is no doubt that the course to maintain hegemony at any cost is doomed to failure." That's from Sergei Lavrov. Now, the three of them were speaking after the ATACMS strike on a beach in Crimea, which the Russians point the finger to the United States as the author of that in terms of the ability to have the technical and logistical direction to strike in Crimea, and more importantly, the fact that it was weapons provided by the United States that were reused for the strike. Not only are they blaming the United States, but they're promising a response. Now, in that context, we have the statement from the International Peace Coalition, which is a demand for negotiations. It was the proposal from an East German association, which was then discussed last Friday and adopted as a resolution to be taken everywhere, to demand that the Putin peace proposal be negotiated, be the subject of negotiations as a way to end the war before it gets out of control. And of course, the United States is continuing to deny responsibility. But we're now seeing reactions from around the world which indicate that the pressure from the population is starting to be felt by political leaders. And again, I point out that those of you who think that demonstrating makes no difference, that getting the truth out doesn't matter, too many people are already brain dead. Well, if they're already brain dead, then we're finished anyway. So instead of submitting to that, go out and try and wake them up with reality. Now, let me give you some examples. After a long period of non-communication between the governments of Russia and the United States, there was a phone conversation yesterday between Secretary of Defense Austin and the Russian counterpart Andrei Belousov. First discussion since March 2023. It was initiated by Austin in the United States. And the idea was to maintain lines of communication, especially after what happened in Crimea. That's significant. Second example, and here I'm going to give you two examples that are based on the European Union parliamentary election returns, in which the political leadership in Germany and France were decimated. In Germany, the London Times is reporting that Friedrich Merz, who's the leader of the Christian Democrats, which was the number one in the vote on June 9th in the European parliamentary elections, but lost some ground to the Alternative for Deutschland. Merz, who had previously been a supporter of the Ukraine war and of Germany providing weapons to Ukraine, Merz said, "It may be time to seek a peace deal with Russia." That's a change, very significant. The parties that are gaining, especially the Alternative for Deutschland, are for ending the war, for no German involvement with weapons. And now the Christian Democrats appear to be at least thinking about moving in that direction. Then we have the puppy regime in France, and I call it a puppy regime because Macron doesn't seem to have enough stature to be a puppet, but he's more like a little puppy who's being ordered around by NATO and the United States. But on a podcast yesterday, he now said he would favor dialogue with Putin. Well, what caused that change? He's been talking about sending French troops into Ukraine. I'll tell you what caused the change. He got smashed in the election. His vote was doubled by of his main opposition, Marine Le Pen. He called a snap election, and it's looking very bad for him coming up for the election this Sunday. We may be seeing the emergence of a new revolutionary spirit in France, where the rejection of the so-called center or the moderates, and the leading parties will probably be Le Pen and the left alternative bloc. Then we have Donald Trump, who for the most part has been somewhat silent on Ukraine. In fact, Trump allowed his supposed henchman, Speaker Johnson, to orchestrate a vote in favor of Biden's $95 billion package, which included over $60 billion for Ukraine. Trump had been opposed to that, but didn't speak out against it, and in fact indicated that he supported the legislative maneuver by Johnson. Well, he came out last week saying that he's not in favor of arms to Ukraine, that the problem is that Biden agreed to the idea of expansion of NATO toward the Russian borders, and that's why the Russians reacted. In other words, Trump acknowledging that it was not an unprovoked attack in February 2022, but was provoked directly by Biden's decision and NATO's decision to try to incorporate Ukraine into NATO. Again, very significant. Finally, there's speculation that the Department of Justice deal, which led to the freeing of Julian Assange, was not based on magnanimity of the United States government, beneficence, recognition that there was something wrong. No, it was a calculated operation by Biden supporters who were afraid that keeping Assange in prison would lose votes among young people. So in each of these cases, what are we seeing? A response to the voters. The sense that if something isn't done to change things, there'll be a tsunami of opposition. And there should be, because what we're facing, if we continue in this direction, is more war and the prospects of a nuclear war. Now, one other example comes from the global south. The riots in Kenya against the tax increase. The tax increase was ordered by the international banks, and the Kenyan government went ahead with it. And along with that, an austerity policy which will lower the standard of living of the population. The result? Tens of thousands of young people took to the streets, and the Kenyan president yesterday went back to the Parliament to say, let's get rid of this tax bill. Again, people power. Now, the Global South is distancing itself from the Anglo-American sole superpower. And we're seeing that the population is looking for solutions. They're against the policy. What are the solutions? Well, start with the International Peace Coalition demand for negotiation. And the negotiation is not just to end war, but to establish a new security architecture, which is based on an economic policy of mutual benefit, of cooperation for economic development. I'm going to be including both the IPC resolution in the description section, plus my discussion yesterday with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, where we talked about this. Don't give in to your doubts. Think big. And join me tomorrow. Remember, it's Friday. I take your questions and comments. Send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. And I hope to hear from you, and I hope to see you becoming active with our mobilization.